Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Adarsh, and today I have Dustin Alper with me. So Dustin is a product designer at Tracer, which is a data aggregation and analytics company based in New York. And today Dustin is going to talk to us about his journey into UI UX, give us some tips on how you can get into UI UX, and share his creative process. So thank you so much, Dustin, for doing this. Really excited to
Yeah,
have
thank
you.
you for having me. Yeah,
Awesome.
excited to be here. Yes.
So let's just jump right in. And why don't you tell me a little bit about how you got into the whole UI UX and a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, sure. So when I was in high school, I had two key interests. One was technology. The other one
Yeah.
was film and television. And it felt like technology was probably the way to go in terms of uh, money, but also it felt like a good option because you still get to stretch that creative the creative muscle,
Mm-hmm.
but in a more standard work environment. So I went to school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I majored in information science, so like just general technology. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to be in tech. And then I had my first internship at A&E Networks, which is A&E, Lifetime, and the History Channel. I don't know if you get those in India, but they're popular channels in America,
Okay.
TV channels.
Yeah.
So it kind of like bridged the
I think
two
we have
interests that I
history.
had.
Yes, we have history. The one on which they have that customization of cars and all those shows, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So I worked for that network
Okay.
as an intern. And I was their IT intern, and they had a rotational program. So I
Mm-hmm.
got to try a bunch of different roles within their IT department. One
Okay.
of those roles happened to be UX, and I instantly fell in love with it. It was something that I actually did prior to A&E, but I didn't realize it had a name to it because I've worked on apps before,
Mm-hmm.
and I did UX stuff, but I didn't realize that it was called UX at the time. So anyway, I did the UX rotation at A&E. I loved it. Knew that I wanted to keep pursuing it. So then I had the next summer I did a UX internship at advertising agency called Publicis,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked on the UX for a drug company. It was a awareness website, and that was the project was okay. Like it wasn't the most exciting thing, but the crazy thing was that I was partnered with a full-time UX designer on the project because I was just an intern. And 2 weeks into the project, and this is like a full website, like a bunch of pages. We're doing mobile, desktop, everything. Um, 2 weeks into the project, that UX designer gets moved off the project onto another one. So now I'm by myself as an
Oh
intern
wow.
who only has I only had the few weeks of experience at A&E doing UX,
Uh-huh.
which was challenging. So, but it was good because it pushed me to learn very quickly on the job, and that was a lot of fun. So I after that internship, I knew, okay, for my full-time job, I wanted to really pursue UX, and I ended up getting a job at Tracer.
Yeah, so talking about Tracer, you were, I think, number five at Tracer, right?
Yep.
So, how's that experience of joining a very early stage startup and setting the direction for the product?
Yeah, it was funny because I didn't fully understand what I was getting myself into.
Hmm. So,
Because
this is straight out of Publicis, right?
I had my publicist internship. Then I finished my last year of school, my senior
Mm,
year
okay.
of
Okay.
college, and then I
Okay.
ended up at Tracer. So
Awesome.
this is maybe like a year after publicist.
Okay.
Um, so I Tracer, before we became Tracer, we used to be an internal ad tech team at an advertising agency called VaynerMedia, and they are now our sister company.
Yeah.
So when I signed up to work at Tracer or VaynerMedia, I
I'm sure a
knew
lot
that
of
we were
people
working.
know about VaynerMedia. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I just always like to assume that people don't. So I
Yeah.
just explain it anyway. But yeah, you're right. So when I was working, or when I applied for the job there, I kind of assumed it was going to be similar to Publicis. It was also an advertising agency where I'd be working on other companies' projects, like it would be more consulting work. But this was a very cool opportunity where we were working on our own tool,
Right.
and it felt like a startup because but we didn't have the stress of like needing special funding or anything because we were inside of VaynerMedia, in the Vayner family. So, and also the stakes were very low because we were an internal tool. We didn't have any external clients. It was just like our fellow VaynerMedia coworkers who would use the platform. If they didn't like something we did, we would just fix it right there on the spot. Like, so that it was a good place to be able to fail gracefully, because I made plenty of mistakes when I started out, and I arguably still do. But Publicis immensely helped me prepare for the job at Vayner/Tracer, because I was kind of thrown in as the only UX person, which I knew going in, but like you don't really know how much work that's going to be until you do it. But Publicis helped a bit, where it's the same. You just have to learn quickly on the job, and I loved that about both experiences. But it was also interesting because when I started, we also not only did we not have any other designers, we didn't have any front-end developers. We only had full stack developers, and everyone leaned towards the back end. So if I had an idea of how to redesign something, most of the developers did not have enough CSS knowledge to really turn my ideas into reality. So that pushed me to learn more CS, because I knew a bit of CS from college, but I was not an expert by any means. So I had to implement my own ideas, which some UX designers do, but it's not as common. And it was an interesting dilemma where if I had an idea, I had to implement it. If I couldn't implement it, then I had to scale down my idea, which and that made me appreciate how engineers work, where it's maybe not worth doing the craziest idea if it's going to take so much time, right?
Yeah.
Like you need to find the right balance of time, efficiency, and what's best for the user.
Yep.
So it was a very good experience, but at times very stressful.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess that was like a really big stepping stone for you in terms of your growth as a UI UX person, right?
I think I've grown immensely since the beginning, but also even the internships, and they were just like 2 months at a time. Like the first one, I discovered UX, which is like just a big epiphany. Second one, honed in on those initial skills by being the only designer on that major project.
Yep.
And then with Tracer, leading an entire product very early on, and understanding how to make like very tough calls is just immensely important.
So next question is, how do you say UI and UX are different? What is your definition of both UI and UX?
Yeah, I think it should be an easy question to answer, but I think all the terminology in the industry is just like overly convoluted, that it just makes it complicated. The way I see it, and the way it's been explained to me, is UI and UX are really the same thing. It's that UI is just a smaller piece of UX, meaning the
Okay.
user interface is going to help create the user experience, but the user interface is not the complete user experience. It's not um, the flows. It's not as focused on the user journey as user sphere as UX is on a whole.
Correct. Okay.
And then a fun thing that I like to talk to all the new hires about. I think I started doing this after you became an intern, but there's
Okay.
this bathroom analogy that I found um, online that I think
Uh-huh.
is great for explaining not only the difference of UI and UX, but explaining what UX is at all, because a lot of people don't even fully understand what UX is. So if developers were given the project to design a house, there's a good chance they might put the bathroom in the kitchen. And the reason for that is all of the water piping is right
Correct.
there.
Correct.
So it's the most efficient way of building a house. Now that's a
Right.
terrible experience because you don't want to be pooping in your kitchen,
Correct.
but it's a very efficient experience.
Yeah.
So a UX designer would step in and say, no, no, no. Even if it's less efficient to put the toilet or the bathroom in a separate room, we need to do that because that is what the user wants. So that's
Correct.
UX.
Okay. That's
UI
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
UI is okay. So now we have a bathroom. We need to make sure that the toilet and the sink visually look like a toilet and a sink. Otherwise, you might be confused where to go to the bathroom, right? And where to wash your
Okay.
hands. So
Correct.
I think that's a good visual analogy for not only what UI and UX is, but how they are different and how they build on each other.
So, as a UI UX person, I'm sure that you have done a lot of user research with Tracer. I know that you talk to a lot of people while building every single feature, right? So, can you walk me through your process of user research and tell me like what to look for, right? Because users oftentimes they want one thing, but when they communicate it, they say something else, right? So,
Yep.
can you walk me through that process? Yeah.
Yep. So our process, just in general, is constantly changing. Like when we were a part of VaynerMedia, our users sat right next to us. We would just go over to their desks and talk to them, or they would come over to us and be like, "Oh, this could be better," and it was a very it was less standardized.
Yeah.
Now we have formal interviews with our users. We brought on a user researcher just to focus on that because it's very time consuming talking to every user and then like synthesizing the findings. We also are working on adding in a user tracking integration into Tracer, so we can virtually watch what all our users do and then find patterns in how they use the tool without having to bother them at all and ask them, "Oh, how's the tool?" We could kind of see how their experience was
Yeah.
from afar. Now you have a good point where like users might say one thing and they mean something else, and we see that often. And it's a difficult to know what to listen to, and what I try to look for is what are the patterns that we are seeing across the users. So if we're doing user research on this pen, and one user says they don't like the pink, every other user doesn't even comment on the color. Maybe they're very focused on how tall the pen is. We probably should not change the color of the pen only because one user said something. And the
Okay.
silence of the other users typically means they didn't have a problem there. But we also have to think about like users in general are just they're a data point in a bunch of things we need to consider. So there's our users, there's the stakeholders, and there's what's also like what's best for the product in general. Maybe we have a group of users that want this pen to have white ink because they work with black paper. But we know what's best for the product is not putting white ink in this pen because all our other users who use white paper will not be able to see the ink. So we have to think of, even if it's maybe best for this one user group, what's best for the product as a whole.
Yeah.
Another thing that we look at when users may say something to us or they may not, we could just kind of watch their mouse as they're either through the user tracking or when we're doing an interview with them and we're testing designs. We could watch their mouse and there's a strong correlation to where their mouse is versus what their eyes are looking at. So we can kind of get a sense of how they are taking in all the content. And it's interesting because a lot of the times users don't realize how much they're struggling. And what I mean by that is if I say to create a report in the UI, they might move their mouse, click a button, it didn't work. They don't think twice about it. They move their mouse again, click another button, it works. And they forgot about that they made a wrong turn, which literally took them a second. And, right. and that doesn't really click for them. So watching the mouse specifically, even if they didn't say, oh, I thought this other thing was the create button, we could see from just watching the mouse, oh, they think the create button's over here. Why is that? And then we could either follow up and ask them, or we could change up the mocks and do another test. And then one last piece is users. It's an interesting psychology of it. Users tend to blame themselves when something goes wrong. Where if an example is, if you don't know how to work your phone, is it your fault or is it the phone manufacturer's fault? So if you have an iPhone, people tend to think, oh, I don't know how to use the iPhone. It's my fault. Correct. It's not their fault. It's Apple's fault.
I mean, it happens all the time with old people, right? Yes. They think
Exactly. So I think people just need to understand that if something's difficult for them, it's don't put the blame on them, put the blame on us. Like I need to do a better job.
So you're saying number one point to kind of solve that problem is to simply ask them and get a survey, maybe do surveys, right?
Yeah,
that's a good.
Yep.
Yeah. Number two is to like watch their mouse, right? What they're actually doing on the thing. And number three is the psychology point that they might be hesitating to say something, but you want them to say it, right?
That's a great synopsis. And I would just add on, the survey piece is fantastic for figuring out who to bring into the room to spend more time with. Because a survey, I could reach out to 100 users at once very quickly. I can't interview 100 users at once. So the survey is going to identify people who have really been struggling with the tool, who have had a fantastic experience with the tool, because I want to understand both sides and the people also in the middle. And then I'll bring someone from each camp in the room and then watch their mouse and do all that psychology and figure it all out there.
Awesome. So you mentioned a little bit about mockups, right? And so can you tell me a little bit about high fidelity mockups and how it has helped you or how it can help any other startup or company out there?
So a high fidelity mockup is a picture that a designer makes that is supposed to be pixel perfect to what the tool is supposed to be once the developer builds it. And mockups vary in fidelity. It could be a doodle on a piece of paper, a sketch on a whiteboard. It could be more of a wireframe, like a blueprint. And then you have the high fidelity mockups. The high fidelity mockups are great, especially for testing, because it's the closest thing you can get a user to the real user interface they're going to be playing with. Yeah. The problem with the high fidelity mockups is it takes a lot of time typically to get there, especially when you're building a new product. It's going to take a while to figure out what the UI should look like exactly. Yeah. And you're probably better off just testing you could, like, there's paper prototyping where you could just draw your designs out on paper and have users, click with their finger, click the piece of paper, and then you just change it to like the next screen. Like that's a totally valid way to test, just to make sure that your initial ideas make sense as you build up to the high fidelity prototype or mock-up. At Tracer, we are very fortunate where we kind of have a standardized set of patterns that we use. And that is all, we have a pattern library built into Sketch. So if we have a new idea and we want to create a high fidelity mock really quickly, we could easily do that by using our pattern library, which is just like, if we want an input, we take the input and place it on the page. So that's something we've built over time, but initially our prototypes were not as high fidelity.
So you said that high fidelity mockups are a great way to test out. So I think this is kind of taking over the prototype model of software development, right? We have waterfall, all those models, right? But even though high fidelity takes time, it doesn't take as much time as the prototyping thing, right?
Right. That's a great question. And I think that it's a great point. Creating a high fidelity mock takes more time than just sketching it out on a piece of paper, but it takes less time than actually building a physical prototype. So I would and there's also tools like we use InVision. Also, Sketch has built-in tools, and Figma has built-in tools to create prototypes off of your high fidelity mocks, which makes it even easier, or it makes it even closer to having a real prototype that it feels like a developer built.
Correct. So, I mean, even for a developer, right, if you're like going straight into the prototype thing, the developer still needs some reference, and I think it'll like take twice the time, right? The developer has to figure out the CSS and everything. So high fidelity mockups are the way to go, right?
Right. And let's go back to the bathroom example. You don't want to build a prototype house where the bathroom is already in the kitchen. What you want to do is have a blueprint showing the bathroom in the kitchen, ask users what do they think, and they could be like, oh, no, this is a problem. So before you wasted your time building this nice prototype, they already were able to call out, the bathroom should not be in the kitchen.
So Dustin has this amazing list on LinkedIn. He's creating content on LinkedIn where he posts these small rules or kind of like short pieces of advice that he's gathered all this while, his years of experience. So you should definitely check it out. I mean, I really enjoy going through those because that's like really short, but like very high impact. So definitely check it out. I'll link Dustin's LinkedIn in the description. So Dustin, I know that you get a lot of ideas, right? And so I was just want to know, what is your process of documenting these ideas? And do you ever feel like you have forgotten something, or, maybe you could go back and like you cannot recollect something? So what do you do to prevent that?
Yeah, I forget a lot of my ideas, for sure. But that's not a problem because I have a lot of ideas in general. So it's just natural that some are not going to make it down on paper. I'm pretty good at remembering where I put an idea if I do document it. So I'll do whatever is closest. Like if I'm at work and there's the whiteboard behind me, I'll jot it on the whiteboard. I'll do Post-it notes, notebooks. I'll take pictures of things and that'll jog my memory. But often a lot of my great ideas, I think as everyone, like they come either at night or in the shower. So at night, I might be a little too tired to document an idea. Typically what I've been doing is if I'm really tired, I find doing voice recordings are the easiest thing for me. So I'll just grab my phone and do a quick voice recording of the idea. In the shower, I just need to remember it by the time I'm done. And that's a 50-50 shot. But it's also interesting focusing more on the Tracer side of things. Like, not only should I be documenting my ideas for me, but I also need to make sure that at least at some level, other people at Tracer have access to those ideas. Where like, if someone wants to either act on one of the ideas or maybe it'll inspire someone in some way, they could do that. Also, if I were to leave Tracer for some reason, that they have access to everything that's like in my head, I think is important. So I've been working on a document recently, which is like, I think it's roughly like 30 pages of
Wow.
what I see as the future of Tracer. And it's just taking all of the scattered post-its and notebooks and the photos and things that haven't even been documented at all. It's just things that are kind of ingrained in my memory, and putting it all down in this one major document that I'm calling the Tracer Almanac. And the idea is it's something that I should strive to be doing once a year, where I just kind of write out what the future state of Tracer in my mind is. So that's been a very fun experience. And I think it's going to be very useful, not only for the developers and people currently at Tracer, but for new hires to be given this document and they could read through it and very clearly understand where Tracer is going next, and something for them to reference back to. So I guess in sum, I think the most important thing, just document however you need to remember the idea.
Yep.
And then once you feel comfortable with that, document in a way where other people can clearly access your ideas. If that makes sense, if it's like a work environment type of idea.
I mean, I've recently started using Notion, like you said, right? I like write down, but then I forget a lot of things. But Notion also, there's this inertia of getting started, right? Like getting that system into that framework into place. So I've been kind of lazy, but it's kind of working. Like it's better than everything else that I've been used so far.
Yeah, Notion is great. Digitally, I typically use Evernote, which I've been using for as long as I can remember. But like I was using Evernote for years, and then maybe this past year or the past 2 years, I kind of naturally stopped using it. But I'm documenting my ideas in all different ways. So like as long as I'm getting it down somewhere, I'm happy.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting to see like these natural cycles I go through, and I'm sure I'll be back in Evernote within the next year.
So talking about great ideas, Dustin did this amazing thing where he proposed to his girlfriend and made like a whole podcast out of it, like a whole series. So I just wanted to call this out, and like there is this video on that day where he proposed on YouTube on the Project Propose channel. So if you're watching this, you should definitely go check it out. The only reason is that you'll understand how creative a person Dustin is, and the lens he can go to, make an impact on somebody else. So, I mean, that's just amazing. I just want to call it out. Like,
And
yeah.
One other thing to add to that is like, obviously I did the video for my girlfriend, now fiance, Brenna.
Yeah.
But I also did the video and the podcast kind of as a symbol that like, I'm not that special. Like if I could do this, anyone could do this. And it's just kind of the power of creativity. So if anything, I would say check it out just to see what anyone is capable of doing. And that kind of goes back to one of the LinkedIn rules. I happen to have it here, rule 165, where if you can master technology, you can master anything. It's just putting the power into your own hands if you're willing to learn.
So, I mean, talking about technology and creating content or creating something every day, right? Why do you think it has become so important to create and put out something out there, especially for like designers or people who are getting into UI UX, right? So what are your thoughts on that? And as also, I just want to call out that Dustin has been creating content like on every single platform. Like he is a born creator. He has like done content on YouTube, Instagram, and podcasts, right? So
yeah. That was something I kind of realized at a young age when I was 13, which like smartphones weren't a thing yet, or actually. When I was 13, the iPhone was announced, I think, that year. So smartphones were just becoming a thing, but we didn't have all of the apps that we do now that makes it like extremely easy to be like creative on TikTok or Instagram and do like a little video. Like we only had YouTube, which was maybe a year old at that point. And to create a video with YouTube, you had to like use your dad's camcorder and then convert it digitally and upload it. So that's where I got my start creatively. I would make these YouTube skits. And it was, again, extremely empowering to be able to take an idea you have in your head and make it into reality, just like what I did with Project Propose, the podcast, and video. So once I did that, it was like, okay, well, if I could do videos, I can do anything else that the computer allows me to do. So I've done the marketing on Instagram. I've created music, built apps. I had a blog at one point. Like anything that I could do, I did just because I could, and just to like stretch that creative muscle and learn. Which I think is an important point when it comes to creativity. You shouldn't really strive for it to be like great. Like you want your work to be good, but I think naturally over time you'll just improve. The most important thing about creativity is creating, just doing, and stretching that muscle. And again, that is how you're going to learn. And that's why it's so important. It not only empowers you to turn your ideas into reality, but it is the best way you are going to learn. Because if someone telling you this is how it should be done is not as impactful as you doing it yourself, realizing the errors of your ways and then improving the next time. Like Adarsh and I were talking off camera before, and he was saying how he did a Zoom interview. For his last Zoom interview, he learned several things he could do better for this one. And it's just those small things, and they add up constantly. And I'm positive you're going to learn better ways of doing an interview based on this one for next time, right? And that only comes from experience. Yeah, exactly. And it was funny because, so I've done all these digitally creative things. Not always, but for the past few years, I've been wanting to do a podcast, and I just didn't have the right topic, because I wanted to do something that I could do a few episodes of and then just kind of call it quits, because I didn't want to do it forever. I just wanted to like tie a bow around it. So when I started planning this proposal, I was like, oh, we could do like a little behind the scenes podcast, and I think that would work pretty well. And it was fun too, because we got some cool people on it. We had Zach, who Adarsh and I worked with at Tracer. We also got Gary Vaynerchuk, where I just brought a microphone into his office and was like, we're doing a podcast. And he was totally cool with it. So it was a really fun experience.
So for someone who is starting out their career as a UI UX person, or who wants to get into UI or UX, what would be some advice that you have so that they can have like a good starting point?
Yeah. The most important thing, the number one thing, is to have a portfolio. Not every career path has the luxury of being able to show off your skill set very easily. And we do. Same thing with engineers, where they also could have portfolios. But there's a lot of like sales positions and things along that nature where it's difficult to show off what you could do. So absolutely have a portfolio. It's the number one thing I look at when I'm interviewing for UI and UX individuals to join Tracer. And then another thing, more on the personal side, is you're going to get a lot of feedback before and after you get a job. You never want to take that personally. Learn quickly to separate yourself from your work. When someone's critiquing whatever you did, it's that they want your work and you to be better. It shouldn't be taken as an attack against yourself. And I find that often in our field, people treat it like it was more of an art project where they get very attached and understand that you're doing a job.
Yeah. I think
Um,
some part of it comes because of the fact that UI and UX is subjective, right? There is no right
yes.
answer to anything. Yeah.
Yes, that's a great point. And we live in this interesting like limbo of there is never a right answer. There's also never a wrong answer. But the way I view it is like that I am always going to be wrong. There I could
Yeah.
always improve. And that's okay. I don't strive for perfection. I strive for what is the best I can do at this moment, ship that out, and then improve if it's a product that we are continuously working on like Tracer, we'll improve it slowly over time as we learn more.
Mhm.
um, but be comfortable with the idea that like you are always going to be wrong, meaning you can always improve.
Right.
um, another very important skill as a UI UX designer, especially when interacting with users, is listening. You don't want to get, you don't, if a user has a problem, like going back to the pen example, and that one user saying that they don't like the shade of pink, don't immediately say, oh, the reason why we chose this pink is because X, Y, and Z. Just accept that feedback, listen to it, and think about it, and see if it ends up being a pattern. And just observe quietly. Um, I think a lot of people say that you need to listen, but I don't think people see how much I personally listen, because often I have to talk and present my ideas, and there's a lot of them. So I am doing a lot of talking, which tends to be louder than me sitting in the corner and just watching and observing. So I just wanted to emphasize that. Um, oh, and then one other thing, and this was something that happened in my interview for Vayner/Tracer, is they asked me, or Layden, our CTO, he handed me a marker. We were talking about a design I did. He handed me a marker and he was like, okay, I want you to mock out this new design for us right now, using the whiteboard.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun in terms of I was able to, in the room, show them what I could do. I didn't have any interview prior to that one where they had me doing anything like UI UX in the room, where all the other interviews were literally just questions back and forth. So I would say be proactive. And if you are in an interview and you feel like you could explain your idea better with a pen and paper, grab a pen and paper and do it for them right there. I think that would come off very well in an interview. So feel free to like break boundaries that way.
Okay, so you just mentioned that you have done a lot of interviews for Tracer and you
Yes.
do it regularly. So, what are some tips for people who are going for like a UI UX interview from you, right, as an interviewer? What are some things that you look for in new candidates?
So a lot of this is like happens to be my LinkedIn content. I do
Hmm.
post a lot about UX and product, but a lot of it is like just helping out with the job search. And there's a lot of things I can say for this answer, but I'm going to keep it as general as possible because I think it's going to be the most powerful way of saying it. The key thing in any interview, regardless if it's UI UX, engineering, sales, whatever, is you want to come off as confident, honest, and kind. It's the biggest thing with any interview, because I do the UI UX interviews, but I also will jump in on various other interviews in Tracer, and those are the three things I always look for.
Hmm.
So let me just dive a little bit deeper
Yep.
into each one of those. Confidence is extremely important, because if you are not confident in yourself, how am I supposed to be confident in hiring you? So just even if you're not very confident internally, you need to make sure you are playing it off as you are extremely confident with all of your answers.
Yep.
With that said, going to the honesty bit, we ask you a question and you don't know the answer, don't confidently give us an answer because we'll be able to read through that.
Yeah.
Just be honest and say like, I don't like that you don't know, you're not sure, you haven't had a lot of experience in whatever we asked you. Because the most important thing, or one of the most important things when we bring you on, is we need to have an understanding of what your skill level is and how we could improve you. And if you are not being honest with where you're at, we're going to have a difficult time getting you up to speed because you're just going to be struggling the whole time. Also, it's just an important quality where like if something, I don't know, is going wrong, or you just have a question about something, just being honest and not being afraid to embarrass yourself, which you shouldn't feel embarrassed. Just feel free to ask or say whatever you want. And then the last thing with kindness is just be nice. Like everyone wants to work with nice people. So really, I think everyone has all of these traits. It's just making sure that you highlight them and that you're just being yourself in the room and not trying to be someone you're not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like really powerful and like applies to everybody, right?
Yeah.
And that also ties back to how teams do not want to work with people whom they cannot trust.
That's a good point also, where like I like to trust people by default.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm bringing you on to Tracer, I need to be able to give you everything off my back immediately and trust that you're going to do the right thing with whatever information I give you. I think it's not as productive for someone to have to earn my trust slowly, because again, it's just going to take too long to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So just trust people instantly, and then hopefully they don't lose it. And that's why I look at those three things, because if you check all those boxes, I'm pretty confident that I can trust you at that point.
So Dustin, do you have any actionable tips for people who are not UI or UX designers, like me, for example, right? So this person would be like a software developer who wants to like work on a side project or an idea, or somebody else who just wants to like put some content out there, create something. So what are some things that you think would bring instant value to the experience?
That's a hard one because context very much matters. A tip that might work for one product will not necessarily work for the other one. What I would say is to find some online resources, go through their tips and figure out which ones overlap with you. So my favorite lately, I've been following a lot of different Instagram accounts that will do like bite-size advice for UI UX. My favorite is an account called UI.Sergio. And he does these carousels of just on one topic. So it might be how to pick a font, or maybe it's not even about how to improve your product, but how to show off your designs. He has a whole series on how to present your designs better if you do have a portfolio, which also works for developers, because not only do you want to, in your portfolio, not only should there be a link to access whatever you built, but you should have some screenshots, and that type of advice could help you show off the screenshots of what you built. So
Dustin, final question. Let's talk about your favorite interview question. Is a hot dog a sandwich or not? So I know that you ask this question for every interview. So tell me a little bit about it, and like, why is this your favorite question? Yeah, and also you have to tell the answer to the question also, of course.
Have to give away the answer. So, well, I'll start off with, I'm more confused about the answer than ever after hearing so many responses to the question. I've heard very good arguments for both sides. It started off as a joke, where I just kind of asked it for fun. It made me laugh, and it made whoever I was interviewing with laugh, and it was like a good icebreaker, even though I asked it at the end of the interview because I was afraid that like it would give the interview a too weird of a vibe. But after asking the question over and over now, it definitely says way more. Their answer says way more about them as a person than I realized. So an example of that is when I'm interviewing for UI and UX individuals. If I ask, is a hot dog a sandwich? And they say, yes, because I think blank, or no, because I think blank. That's very interesting to me because as a UI, UX individual, I would think that they would focus on not how they feel, but how other people feel about the hot dog. And that's how I think about it is a hot dog a sandwich? I would think no, because I think universally people don't tend to consider it to be a sandwich. And that's why it's a question to begin with is like, I mean, technically like it could be a sandwich. Like it does fit in that category.
If it was definitely a sandwich, then this question would never exist. Right. Okay.
Right. And that's why I think it's not a sandwich, because we as a society have kind of put this thing that could fit in the sandwich bucket. We took it out of it. And that's another interesting piece where like, as humans, we just love to over categorize and over group things, and over label things. And like, I sent you, the cube rule, that is where I don't remember it exactly, but basically someone documented the entire, is a hot dog a sandwich argument online, and then came up with this cube rule where like, if it has one side of the cube, it's like a salad, and then like three sides is, I don't remember, a hot dog or whatever. So eventually like everything fits in this cube rule, any type of food, or maybe even anything in general fits in this cube rule of like defining things. And what they are doing is they are literally putting things into a box, but that's not how things work in reality, right? Just because we want to categorize something as a cube doesn't mean we should. In general, there's just more nuance to things and detail to things. And when we categorize them, we lose all that nuance and detail. So I would say, no, a hot dog is not a sandwich. But at the same time, that is not the real point of the question. I just want to kind of hear, regardless of if their answer is yes or no, how did they get to that answer?
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this, Dustin. I mean, it's been a really, really interesting conversation. And I'm sure that those who are watching this would have like a lot of tips to take away. And yeah, thanks so much for doing this. Like, really appreciate it. And I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'd love to talk anytime.